Okay, let's move on to our next topic. Right, so we've looked at aggregate demand, and before that we had looked at the aggregate expenditure model. So what we want to understand about the aggregate expenditure model was it was just consumption, it was just GDP, right? There was no supply side, right? There was no cost of production, technology, and things like that, which when there was an increase in prices and an increase in unemployment, which is called stagflation, it was not recognizable because the model didn't show a supply curve. So what was happening in the 70s, beginning of the 80s, was a leftward shift of a supply curve, causing prices to go up and output to go down. But because the model didn't have it, didn't know how to fix the problem. So that's why supply side Reaganomics and all that kind of stuff came to be. We're going to look at aggregate supply, which is a relationship between price levels, again the y-axis, and the amount of real domestic output, real GDP, which is the x-axis again. Right? I'm going to put both these curves on the axes together. Right? But before we go there are three stages in aggregate supply that you need to be aware of. There is immediate short run. There is the short run, and then there is the long run. Do not confuse these with the micro, long run, and short run. All right, so let's take them one at a time. Aggregate supply, immediate short run. What does that mean? It means, and again, it depends on the firm, it's lasts as long as both input and output prices are fixed, right? So it's the term we're going to use quite often in this class is the term is sticky. If prices are sticky going up or coming down, right, which really means they're fixed. So what do we mean by input prices, right? Let's look at input prices, which is the cost of production, right? 75% of the cost of a firm is wages, right? So wages are usually, you have a contract, you agree to a certain salaries for a certain amount of time, right? So therefore, input costs, and a lot of times you'll get into a contract with your vendor for other parts of the input cost. So it's very difficult for input prices to change that quickly. All right, so therefore they're fixed. And then output, and again, the time really just is until, so you're in the immediate short run until one of the prices or the cost, input cost or output prices, one of them becomes flexible, then you're out. Okay, and output prices usually adjust a little quicker, right? But if I own my barbershop last year had this sign and it was painted on and everything. So in order to change prices, they had to go out and buy a whole new sign and redo everything. That means it's a little harder for them to raise prices so quickly, okay? Unless they want to keep making new signs, which is a cost to the business they don't want to do. All right, so input output price is fixed, okay? And this is what the graph would look like. It's a horizontal line, okay? Because we've said they're all sticky. Okay, then let's look at aggregate supply in the short run. This begins right after the other one ends. Okay, it's a period of time during which output prices are flexible. So now the barbershop can buy the new signs, but the firm is still locked into the cost of production. Right, so the input prices are fixed or highly inflexible. What would that look like? It's an upward sloping demand curve. And just make sure we're all correct, all on the same page. Price level, real GDP, zero in the origin. If you were to graph this, that's what I would expect. Okay, and then we come to the long run, right, which follows the short run, and that is when output and input are fully flexible. They are no longer sticky, they are now flexible. That's what the aggregate supply long run would look like. If we put them all together on one curve, this is what it would look like. We would have down here horizontal, immediate short run, then we would have short run, then we would have long run. All right? What you want to know here is we're going to focus on this upward sloping part for the rest of the course. All right? Long run is vertical at full employment. So you see here on the axis we have YF, right? That's real, that's income. Full employment income. Y stands for income. Capital I is used for investment, little I is used for interest rates. So we go to Y for income. F down there means full employment. Okay, and so what we're having is we're having long-run aggregate supply at the output with all our resources to their fullest. Wait a minute, Mr. Mooney. If all the inputs, excuse me, if the output is equal to using all their resources to their fullest, isn't that what the PPC curve is? You're right, Sim. Okay, this curve is also can be depicted by a PPC curve. All right, so now let's put it together. Here's my supply curves. Again, I'm only going to focus on this part. All right. So here's the remainder of the cost, upward slope input. So this is how you're going to draw it. Your AS will look like this. Remember in the other graph, your AD came down this way. All right, so now we've talked about what stages and phases that we're in, but now we got to decide what's going to change aggregate supply. So the first thing to change aggregate supply would be change in input prices. If it's cheaper to produce, aggregate supply will increase, causing the price level to fall. Output to increase. Okay? What type of input prices? We could look at domestic or imported resources. Let's go back to the project. We talked about tariffs, and there was a company that was annoyed that the steel prices were making their inputs more expensive, and it was causing their aggregate supply to change. Didn't say it in the article, but I'm telling it to you now. So therefore, we would go to other countries possibly to get the cheaper ones. All right, so that's one thing to change it. Change in productivity. Okay, so if workers are more productive, then aggregate supply will increase. And then changes in legal, institutional things such as business tax and subsidies, government regulations. All right. Talked about this. So let's look at what happens when input prices increase. Aggregate supply shifts to the left, and price and output will change. All right. What happens if the input prices become cheaper? Aggregate supply shifts to the right, and that's what we get. Okay. So we talked about domestic input, right, which are capital, labor, land, imported resources, imported oil. Exchange rates come into effect here. What you want to understand too is the oil part. This is what caused the stagflation of the 70s. There was the oil crisis, which caused the input prices to increase, causing the aggregate supply curve to shift to the left, causing inflation, but yet less output, so we therefore had more unemployment. Okay, so those are your inputs. Then we looked at productivity, which is real output per unit of input. Increases in productivity reduce cost, and obviously a decrease in productivity increase cost. So productivity is equal to total output divided by total inputs. All right, per unit production cost, total input cost over total output. Then we talked about legal institutional environments, right? Legal changes alter per unit cost of output. So there's this whole thing talking about with Joe Biden coming in that regulations may become more prevalent, and that means that it could be more expensive, right? How do we go around those? We could tax and subsidize, right? The government regulation, as I spoke about. All right, so that's your aggregate supply. The next video I will do, I'm going to put aggregate demand, short run aggregate supply, and then I'm going to put long run aggregate supply, and we're going to figure out where the economy is producing compared to where they should be producing. Right? We always want to be producing at the long run output, YF. Right? Okay, that wasn't too bad. A little quicker than the last one. All right, boys and girls. Have a lovely day.